Alright, so here we go. I'm going to change the oil on a 2011 Toyota Tacoma 6-cylinder. Got my oil pan here, my oil catch pan. And I really like this one because it's closable. You can just take it straight to AutoZone or Walmart and have them recycle the oil and get your container back. For my truck it takes 5W30 and it takes about 5 quarts, so I'm going to put the whole thing in. And I got my filter here, my Fram Extra Guard, and yeah, so got my paper towels, clean up any messes here. Got my wrench, my 14mm wrench for the drain plug on the oil pan, and then I got my trash bag so I can throw away all the oily rags and discard of everything I need to. So for my truck, as you can see, the oil filter is right here. Generic oil filter. And then we'll come down here and I'll show you where the oil pan is. Now, my oil pan is right there. It's in the front. But if you look back here, there's another pan right there. And that's one for the transmission. You do not want to drain that. Otherwise, it'll be a big deal and a big problem for your vehicle. You won't be able to use it until you refill your transmission fluid. And that can be a problem. For my truck, it's a big problem because it's a closed system and there's no way to add transmission fluid without making it a big hassle. Then you got to test it, see if it's got the right fluid levels in it, and that can be a big pain in the butt, especially if you don't have the equipment to do that. So best not to have to bother with that. So I'm gonna get started, and I got my 14mm wrench, and then I'll get back to you. Alright, so one thing to remember with this oil catch pan is once you take the cap off, you can place it up here, but you want to make sure you have this guy open right here, this little drain plug here, or the air hole. Alright, so one thing that you need to do is break that cap loose, and then it's best if you take and loosen it by hand the rest of the way once you get it broken loose. And as you can see here, now I made a little bit of mess right there, but it's a good thing to have this oil pan positioned, this oil catch pan positioned in a good place so that you don't end up with splashing. I've had that happen before and it makes quite the mess. Now, one thing that I forgot to do here that I like to have is I'll take a bottle like this and I'll cut it around here so that there's a cup to catch the oil that's going to drain out of the oil filter when I unscrew it, because it'll just drain straight down. Alright, so now I've got my bottle cut in half and got my little oil catch here, so I'm going to go take this and install it, and then I'm going to take the oil filter off. So if you look down in here, let's see if I can't get a good picture of it. There's just a little spot right here, right there where my oil thing will, it just rests right on a hose, and so that should drain right into that. And when I take this off here, and the one thing that you got to remember about your oil filter when you're putting a new one on, and I'll show you in a minute, is that you got to make sure that you oil the gasket around the oil filter, and that you don't tighten it too tight, because if you tighten it too tight and you don't oil that gasket, it's going to be a problem getting it off the next time you want to change it. So we're just going to let that drain here into that cup, and we'll be back as soon as it stopped draining. Alright, looks like our oil filter is pretty much ready to take out of here, so it's done draining, and I'm going to set that in this bag over here so I don't make a mess, and I'll get the new oil filter out here, and we'll put that in. Let's see if I can do it with one hand and film at the same time. So you want to what you want to do is you want to take a bit of oil, used or new, doesn't matter, and make sure you oil this gasket. Make sure it's got a nice little layer of oil on there. So that'll make it a lot easier to come off the next time. And like I said, you only want to hand tighten this. You don't want to tighten it too tight because it'll weld itself to the this part right here, and it'll be a real big pain to get out. So my next step is just to oil that. So I'll take a little bit of this oil that's in the reservoir still, and I'll just go around it. Make sure that I get a good amount of oil on that seal, because I've had them where I didn't do this when I first changed my oil, and I tell you what, it was a nightmare the next time I wanted to come and do it. So we're gonna go check out the oil draining here and see what we're at. It looks like we're doing pretty good down there. Now, one thing that I like to do, just to kind of flush it out a little bit, and that is to pour just a little bit of oil, fresh oil, in there. I'm gonna set this cap down. Oh, and there's one more thing that I didn't do, and I didn't show you yet, but I'm going to take the other part of that bottle, and I'm going to use it like a funnel. So we can put this guy on here now, and it just goes right on there, like the other one. Now, that's pretty decently tight. I don't know if you can see it, but then I'm just going to turn it until it becomes a little bit hard to turn with two, three fingers, and that's it. That's all you need to do. So we'll continue to let that drain a little bit, because there's still a little bit of residual down there. And now I'm going to take and pour a little bit of oil in there just to give it a little bit of a flush. Alright, I've got the other half of that bottle that I cut apart, and as you can see right here, it fits in there nicely. Just sits right in there. And so it kind of makes it easy when you need a funnel and you don't have one. You can just take the top half of that. I believe it's a 1 liter bottle. Yeah, so pretty easy, and we're gonna put a little bit of oil in there just to kind of flush things out a little bit. And I almost forgot one more thing. When you're using this, you really want to hold on to it when you're pouring oil into it, because it has a tendency to want to fall out on its own. Now, as you can see, I got that fresh clean oil coming down, and it looks pretty clean. I didn't put very much in it. The rest of it's going to go back into the truck as soon as this finished draining. And we'll put the oil plug in and fill her up with oil. Then we'll let it sit for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come and test the oil and see what we're at. I'm going to have to start it, so we'll start it first, then give it about 10 minutes to settle back down and see how much oil we got in the oil pan, and see if we need to add more or not. So I got my half of a bottle here, and that's about how much oil drained out of that filter. As you can see, it's pretty dirty, so it's definitely time for an oil change. Alright, well, it's pretty well drained. I could let it sit here for a while and it'll continue draining, but I don't feel like it's necessary to get every last drop out. Alright, so I'm going to take a paper towel here and clean that off so I know that I'm not leaking any oil. I'm going to clean it pretty good. And then I'm going to tighten it up here with my wrench. And you really don't want to go too tight. So just till it's nice and snug. But you don't, like I said, you don't want to over tighten that. And I'm just going to go over it again here. Just make sure I got it all. Pull my oil catch pan out. And when I'm done with this, I'll clean off the top, wipe it down really nice so I can take it to AutoZone or Walmart or wherever, and it'll be nice. So I'll let that finish draining, and then I'll come back and clean this up here in a minute. But before I start it, one thing you want to remember is make sure you took your cup out of there, or your bottle, or whatever you're using to catch your oil from your oil filter. And it looks like I took it out, so we're good. The other thing is I got my oil cap on, And I'm gonna come down here and check for leaks real quick. Just to make sure it looks like everything is doing great, no leaks. And so we're gonna start it up and then check for leaks. And if it's leaking anywhere, we'll tighten the filter or we'll tighten the drain plug. So it looks like no leaks there, and no leaks there. We're gonna let it warm up, and we'll come back in a few minutes and make sure it's not leaking after everything's heated up, because sometimes when it heats up, everything becomes a bit more fluid, and that can cause things to leak. So let it run, let it warm up, and if it doesn't have any leaks, you're good to go. All right, now that the truck is up to temperature, we're gonna take a look here and just look at the bottom of that oil filter and make sure that there's no leaks, and it looks like there's no leaks there. And then we're gonna take one more look at the drain plug, make sure we're not leaking down here. As you can see, there's no drops of oil on the ground, and we're not leaking. So now I'm gonna go ahead and shut it off and then let the engine sit for about 10 minutes. Okay, so after you do your oil change, for my truck at least, you need to reset the miles on the oil change, or there's a light that comes on that says maintenance required, and it'll start flashing about 300 miles before your next required oil change, and it does this every 5,000 miles. Alright, so what I had to do was I had to hold that button down with the key completely off, and it's on trip A right now. So if I press that, you can see it's on trip A, and so that's where you want to start out. And here, let's do that and then that. Turn it back off. Oh, come on. There we go. So with it on trip A and the key completely off, you'll press that and hold it. Then you'll turn the key and then turn it again and keep holding it, and then it'll reset that little meter. So now when I turn it on, the little maintenance required will go away and it won't come back. So there you go. That's all you need to do, and that's it. Now I'm going to let it sit here, and then I'll come back and check the oil one more time. Make sure that I have the right oil level in there, because you don't want to be too full, and that's it.